Alright, I'm going to be doing my presentation on Chapter 4. And Chapter 4 is all about comments in programming, which, in my opinion, is probably one of the most important things you can do or incorporate into your programming habits. And you're probably going to have to eventually learn to do it or be forced to do it. So basically, comments are just ways of leaving little notes or comments in your code to help explain what something might do, whether it be a variable, a method, or even the entire class, what its function is. They're really important because when you start working on big projects, like thousands of lines of code, you're gonna forget what certain things do. So it's important to leave comments where you see them fit. So when you go back or if someone else looks at your code, they'll know what it's for. Because there's nothing worse than, like, you can imagine looking at someone's program for the first time and them having no comments explaining anything and wondering what it does. It's probably going to be pretty difficult to figure it out unless they explain it to you, which, people don't have time for that in the work environment. That's a waste of money. So this is where comments come into play. You leave comments and let them know what your program does, what each variable does, and just how the program works. And like I said, you're going to have to learn to do it eventually, because if you want to get a job as a developer or programmer, the company that you work for is probably going to require it, because you're going to be working on a team of people, and it's going to be necessary to leave comments so they know what you're doing without having to sit down and babysit them and explain it, which is, like I said, a waste of money and time. Okay, so remember, when you're writing comments, don't be redundant. Only leave a comment if it's necessary and it helps. You don't want to be leaving comments everywhere to just junk up your program and just clutter it. Only leave it if it'll help and explain something and just be useful. So a couple things that you could do with code or comments, excuse me, is you can leave like a change log at the top of your program. So if you're working on a really big program over the course of a couple weeks, months, or even years, it's important to leave like a little log of all the changes that you've made over time. So you would leave like a date and just a comment of what you did on that day to change the program. It's important to keep logs of things, just for record keeping purposes. So there's two main types of comments, at least around Java, that you can utilize. JavaDoc, which is the built-in documenting system that they have, and then inline comments. Inline comments are the most simple. You just two forward slashes and then leave a comment of text, whatever you want to say, above the code or in line. And then JavaDoc, like I said, is the built-in documenting system that Java has, and it basically adds like a tag to every variable that you've created in a method to help it just explain it better. It's like a little template that they've created to create comments. It's very useful, and you're going to have to use it a lot in the field. And another thing, avoid misleading comments. If you're going to leave a comment, make sure that it's clear and concise and it relays the message well to the person that's going to be reading it. Because if you just leave a message and no one knows what it means, it's probably going to confuse them even more. So, just make sure that you're clear with your message and they know what they're reading. So it's important to remember, leaving comments and using them is going to make your job a lot easier in the long run. Like I said, it's going to save time that you would have to spend explaining your code to someone. Whereas if you left comments like detailing what everything does, they could probably figure it out on their own. So, saves time, saves money, everybody's happy. And really important to remember, comments do not make up for bad code. Just because you have a bunch of code and you comment it all and you think that you've explained everything perfectly, if your code doesn't work, it doesn't work. So no matter how well you've documented your code, if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. So just make sure that your code works first of all. And another thing, keep it simple. Like I said, you don't want to have sentences upon sentences of comments trying to explain your code. Keep it simple, keep it quick, and just relay your message in a nice, clear, and simple way. Okay, so right here, it's just a very simple example of how helpful comments can be. Just looking off, let's look to the left side first. You see, I'm just declaring three variables. That's it. One called k, which is an integer, another integer called days, and then a location, which is a string. Now, if you were looking at this, like for the first time you are now, you probably have no idea what this is. It's just random clutter. And of course, you can look to the right now and see if you were to add comments to it. This adds a whole new context to the code that makes it now easy to understand. You can see what it might be for. So you can see that the integer k represents a number of hours worked total. So this is probably like some type of job program. And then the next line for days, integer days, it says that it's the number of days to complete the job. Okay. And then the next string location, address of client. So this is obviously like some type of way to keep track of customers for a job or something. And you would never be able to tell that without comments explaining what each variable does and what the purpose of it is. So it just adds some context to the code and makes it a lot easier to understand. So that'll just about wrap it up for the quick explanation on comments. Overall, they're an important thing that you need to learn to use, and you're going to have to use if you want a job. Because, you're going to be working with groups of people. It's important that everyone knows what your program does without having to explain it to them all the time. And that's where comments come in. So learn to use good comments and use them correctly, and it'll make your job a lot easier as a programmer.